The whole idea is to have one agreement to govern all future relationships until you terminate the business relationship.
Welcome to the Contract Teardown Show from Law Insider, where legal experts tear down contracts from some of the most well-known companies and high-profile executives around the world.
In this episode, Rebecca Ndungu, in-house counsel in the telecommunications industry, tears down a master sales agreement from TeleCommunications Systems Inc. The MSA sets terms for on-the-ground services that can really add up in these infrastructure projects. So, let's tear it down. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Contract Teardown Show from Law Insider. I'm Mike Whalen. The purpose in the show is exactly what it sounds like. We take contracts and we beat them up. Sometimes we're nice, but usually we are not. We are often mean. I am here with smart friends like Rebecca Ndungu. Rebecca, how are you today?
I'm well, Mike. How are you?
I think I'm good. I lost a tooth last night, as an aside, which is so weird, but I had a baby tooth that an adult tooth never grew in. So yesterday, at 43 years old, I lost my last baby tooth. Nobody left money under my pillow. I'm feeling very offended. I feel like the tooth fairy might not be real. That's what's going on in my life today. So finally, at 43 years old, I have grown up.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
I'm just old. I appreciate you being with us. We're going to talk about a document. Let me share it with the folks at home. It is this document. It is a telecommunication system master sales agreement. And we're going to talk about what a master sales agreement is and really dig into it. But Rebecca, before we get started, tell me about this document. What is it? Why are we talking about it? When will lawyers run into this kind of thing?
So essentially, a master sales agreement is a framework agreement used by parties mostly in the telecommunications industry to govern any current and future relationships. The whole idea is to have one agreement to govern all future relationships until you terminate the business relationship.
Right. So basically we get this big thing in place and then everything else is going to be little purchase orders, deliver this by this date or whatever, but reference the original. Got it. And then tell me about you. Tell me about your background. What brings you to these kinds of documents?
Okay, so my name is Rebecca Ndungu. I am an advocate practicing in Kenya. 5 years in practice, started as a private practitioner, but now I'm an in-house in a telecommunications company. We mostly deal with bandwidth, dark fiber, and in my course of practice, I deal a lot with master service agreements because that is the nature of our business.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Yes. Well, then what we're going to do is we're going to go through this document piece by piece. Let me share it again. So here it is. Again, this is the first page, and I want to share this again so that we can talk to people about the master sales agreement. If you look in number 1, Rebecca, I'll point you there, 1.1, under the scope of agreement. Talk to me about this section, the language they use, and how they build the relationship between this document and other documents in the future.
So essentially, the scope of and can we call it an MSA, just so that we don't keep on saying the master sale? Yeah, the scope of an MSA covers all the products a company offers. It can be bandwidth, local loop, fiber. So it covers all the products and services. It's sometimes software of what the company deals with. So essentially, it has the general terms and conditions. For whatever product you buy, you will still be governed by the same terms and conditions. However, we have small contracts, maybe mostly 1-pagers or 2-pagers. They are called service order forms. In other times, they are called work order forms. These are now specific contracts to a particular product. If you want 100 MB of bandwidth, there's now you'll get a service order form, which essentially is a contract in itself. Since there are two agreements governing one relationship, in case there's a conflict, the service order forms always takes precedence over the MSA. And I mean, sometimes it matters if you have a service level agreement, it now comes the service order form, the master service agreement, and then the service level agreement. Let me clarify that because I want to make sure that I understand it. So if I hire this telecommunications company and we get this really long document, and then in order to execute the work that we talked about, there's another document that says, hey, you're going to show up on Tuesday and dig a trench over here so we can lay some cable or whatever. So you're saying that
The come dig the trench and lay the cable is the document that like modifies the master sales agreement, or the master sales agreement is the one that says, hey, you dig in that trench, you can't violate what's in the MSA. Does that make sense?
I get your question. So ideally, a service order form is like a one-pager document with very simple terms and conditions, mostly how much you're required to pay,
Right.
uh, terms of termination, just like not as detailed as in the MSA.
Got it.
So we are saying the service order takes precedence, and then the MSA. And
Right.
then the service level agreements in
Right.
other cases, or some other cases is a service order, the service level agreement, and then the master service agreement.
Right. So in creating this kind of structure, you have to be really clear about in the document that you're actually working on, like what's the relationship between this document and the other ones, which makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
So let's jump down to 4.1. There's this bit about acceptance. It says products and services delivered by TCS shall be considered accepted by the customer upon completion of the completion criteria. Talk to me about this section 4.1.
So you find that in most telecommunication services or products, a customer is given time to test the product, whether it's up to standard, whether it's working in accordance to their requirements. That's why you're given mostly 14 days or 30 days to test the product. After testing the product, you're required to sign something called an acceptance certificate. This acceptance certificate shows that you have accepted the product and it's working in accordance to what your requirements. Then from there is when you start billing the client. So you might have handed over the product like maybe 2 months before, but as long as the client hasn't signed the acceptance certificate, you cannot start billing the client. So if you see in this clause, I like the way it was drafted because the service provider was very clear that even if you don't sign the acceptance certificate within 30 days from the time it was delivered to you, it will be deemed that you have accepted and they'll start billing from that date. So also as a service provider, you have to be very careful. You don't want to give the customer like an open time, like you can only start billing as soon as they sign, because some might take 2 months, 3 months just to delay the process. So you must also cap the time, 30 days from the time we deliver it. If you don't sign, it will deem to have accepted, and then you start billing from then.
Hey everybody, I'm Mike Whalen. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Contract Teardown Show. Real quick, I want to ask you to do me/you really a quick favor. Look down below. You'll see a discount code to join the Law Insider Premium subscription. When you do that, you get access to more content like this. You'll see webinars, daily tips on contract drafting, not to mention access to the world's largest database of sample contracts and clauses. It will help you write better contracts faster. If you want to do it right now, there's a code below, so get there. Also, if you're part of a larger team, if you're in-house or in a law firm, just email us. We're at sales@lawinsider.com. We'll make sure you get a deal as well. Come join us in the community. The code is below. Let's get back to the show. Got it. Very good. And then down in 4.3, it says, the customer shall own all title and interest in all hardware delivered under this agreement, unless such hardware is subject to the terms of a leasing agreement. Tell me about the difference, that the line that draws in 4.3.
So in our case, we do a lot of dark fiber, and most of this dark fiber, we give them on lease for a particular period of time. So in that case, the title does not pass to them, but we are in charge of maintaining it in case there's a fault. We do routine maintenance, and the customer is actually required to come with his own equipment. So in that case, lease agreement, it's for a particular period of time. After the time expires, after the time expires, the contract is over. The title does not pass. But of course, we do not also, that there are some products like local loop, bandwidth, those services that are not hardware, they are
Right.
software. We don't also confer the intellectual property rights. We retain the rights.
Oh, okay. Is that pretty standard in that industry in your area?
Yeah, it's pretty standard, yeah. Because
All right.
the service provide, okay.
Yeah, and you definitely have to make that distinction in here. Jumping down to 5.1 under Invoices and Payment, it says that the customer shall pay the amount in the work order for the products and services. TCS may invoice the customer for the amount specified in the work order for products and services only upon their acceptance. What do you think about the language in 5.1?
The language I'm okay with the language because, as I have stated earlier, the MSA is a general, it gives you the general terms and conditions. So, of course, the payment and the terms of payment will be in the work order form or the service order, which is now depends on the particular product that you're getting from the service provider. So, all the terms, the taxes, what is payable is normally contained in the work order or the service order.
Got it.
Yeah.
Jumping down to 6, there's this term and termination of agreement. And since, the length of the contract, a lot of rights are changing at the end of the length of the contract, this seems like a really important section. It says that once everybody's signed, there's a period of 3 years in that initial term, and then some clauses about what happens after. What do you think about the language in 6.1?
I'm not very okay with the language, particularly the term of the contract. 3 years, I feel like it's a long period of time. As a customer, I would not want to be tied for an initial period of 3 years. I would mostly recommend 1 year automatic renewal until either party decides to terminate, just because in some contracts, there's consequences for terminating before the expiry of the initial period. So if the initial period is 3 years, and if you terminate before the expiry, you're required to pay the remainder, the amount remaining for the term. You see, that's a very long period of time. So it's easier if you take it 1 year, automatic renewal, so that in case, even if you want to terminate before the initial period, you won't have, there's not much money to pay because it will be a few months remaining as opposed to, 3 years.
Right.
So I would rather they take 1 year automatic renewal until either party terminates. And I think they should have also included the consequences for terminating before the expiry of the initial period.
Right. Yeah, and you get to 6.2 and it starts talking about that. And my sense is, and tell me if this is right about these kinds of contracts, that, especially where hardware is concerned, there are literally people digging trenches and laying significant amounts of line. It feels like there's a bunch of investment from the company to make this sort of infrastructure happen. What do you think about the penalties or the results of terminating early under 6.2?
Essentially, as you've said, like service providers, we invest a lot of money. Before you take on a project, you have to do surveys. You have to see how long it will take for you to recover the money and start making profit. So that's why mostly that determines the initial period. I have to read what the penalty is.
I don't think there is one.
I know, that's why I was like, was there a penalty?
Alternative right to suspend delivery.
No, actually, they can just suspend.
Yeah. Signs this agreement are all or substantial part of the infrastructure used to provide services directly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't look like there is any kind of penalty.
I think it's recommended that you put consequences for terminating before the initial period, and most of the times is you're required to pay the remainder for the
contract. Yeah, the initial term, right? Like you finish out the term, right?
You finish out the term. Some even say 2 times that or half, depending on the project.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that it's different, because this sentence includes either party may terminate this agreement and any work order with written notice. I would think that the penalty for those 2 things should be very different, because a work order is like, hey, go do the project, go dig this trench over here. The full agreement, this agreement is like, this is a huge investment of resources. So I would assume that they would probably want different consequences for each of those. And speaking of, let's jump down to 14. It talks about disputes. And, of course, we're dealing with cross-border agreements here. A lot of times we're pointing right to arbitration, and it talks about the commercial arbitration rules of the American Arbitration Association for work that's being done, in this case, in Africa. What do you think about that? What do you think about 14?
Yeah, just to clarify, this agreement is between 2 companies that are in the US, but if it's like an international contract, of course, it's always advised to pick the ICC, the International Court of Arbitration. That is, most companies are members, and most companies use those rules for arbitration. And I've done one, and I've gone through the process. I've experienced it. It's a very seamless process. They're very They're very helpful in case you have any questions. They help you appoint the arbitrator. They oversee the process. They review their award. So I would always advise for any cross-border contracts, you always choose arbitration to be governed by the ICC rules and the International Court of Arbitration.
Right. Yeah, and to that point,
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
if we jump down to 16.7, I mean, you can see, to your point, a lot of America-centrism, because this is two companies in America. But in your case,
Yeah.
when we're doing cross-border agreements, this talks about if there's a fight afterwards, we're submitting to the laws of the state of New York. What do you think about that in the case of you guys' work?
Because we are a Commonwealth country, and most countries are, we always choose the laws of Wales and England. They're easier, like all our laws, our Kenyan laws are borrowed from that. So it's always easier for us to even go research on their laws and even undertake the dispute resolution process. However, internally, as a matter of policy, we always, I mean, if it's not Kenyan laws, laws of England and Wales. If it's not that, the senior management has to make a decision on whether they want to proceed with the contract, because it's very hard to go read like maybe the laws of Netherlands, interpret them. It will be very hard for lawyers based here in Kenya.
Right, because then you got to know the
Yeah.
laws of every dadgum country that you might sign
Yeah.
with. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, and I'm thinking like stepping down and maybe outside of this document and your experience with dealing with documents like this, you wanted to talk about some things that are missing. Quickly, tell me about what are some sections that you would like to see in a document like this that you're not seeing?
The most important one, as part of the annexure, is the service level agreement. I mean, for all services and telecommunications products, you must have an SLA that gives you the standards. What in case of a fault, what happens? How long do you take to resolve the fault? I mean, you're dealing with people who have maybe banks; their customers will be down, so you must have an SLA, which must, of course, be reviewed by the technical team for both entities. The next thing that is missing from this contract is the confidentiality clause. I think that's a boilerplate that is in all contracts. I'm not sure why it was missing from this one.
Right.
I don't even need to explain that further. And another thing is from the contract is the delivery of the service. It should have a detailed delivery, like what is the timeline? How long do you take to do the survey? How long do you take to deliver the project? What if it's not delivered on time? What happens? Can we change the dates and such things? That is very important for any telecom product. The other thing is maintenance. How will we maintain the service in case we want to modify? Sometimes if it's a dark fiber, the road is being constructed, you might want to reroute the network. What happens in such a case, and how do we go about it? And another thing is subcontractors, because you find that in most telecoms company, they always subcontract for people to dig the trenches, as you've called them. You
Yeah.
always there needs to be a clause that allows you to subcontract and how to go about it. And the other thing is data protection. Of course, this is
Yeah, I was thinking about that. This document, I'd point out, this thing is dated 2005, right? And so
yeah.
I would guess now, with all the laws that have passed in data privacy, especially for a telecommunications agreement like this, like as the basis of this agreement, you would have to include pretty robust standards now for data protection and who's responsible. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to, especially in places where you are collecting data from the natural persons, may it be the contractors who are coming to check on your equipment or anything, how you handle it, and you make sure they are compliant with the GDPR and the local laws. That is something that has to be standard in current contracts. And I think that's about it. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking, like, stepping back again, big picture, I sort of feel like the relationship of an MSA and, a purchase order or whatever, it kind of allows for this mix of brevity and depth, right? That in general, though we might favor brevity, like really shorten your document, make it super easy, the fact that in this sort of structure, you have two options. You have the ability to really go deep in an MSA for all kinds of scenarios, because really most of the business operations are going to be covered under something like a purchase order or a services order. What do you think about that in terms of an MSA? Do you think that there's value to really trying to be brief, or in an MSA, should you really, dig and have a freaking really long document to try to cover all the possible outcomes?
I think there's value in having a comprehensive MSA. just because, for example, you find that most customers, they want the service very fast. We want it now, 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 now. So at that point, you kind of just deliver the service using the service order. But at the back, like now the lawyers are fighting with the MSA.
Right.
I mean, it has happened in so many cases. So I feel like MSA is important, to be honest, because it's still the same document that we'll use, whether they want additional products, whether they want a different product, whether they want additional capacity, still the same document. So I feel like you should take as long as you want with the MSA, make sure everything is watertight, and because the service order are just like one pager, they don't give the detail of like the implementation, the delivery, and all those things about the service and the product.
If the lawyers are going to fight and slow things down, you'd rather them do it once than every time you're trying to purchase something. So the structure seems to really help, and I appreciate you sharing that information about it. For people who want to contact you, Rebecca, and learn more about your work in this industry and in your part of the world, what's the best way to reach out to you?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. I think you can share my link. I'm called CS Rebecca Ndongo, or they can reach out to me on email, counselrebecca@gmail.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, we will include that information to reach out to you. And also this document, we'll have a link to this document on a blog post at lawinsider.com/resources. And if any of you watching want to be a guest on the Contract Teardown Show, be a contributor and be mean to documents like we often do, just email us. We are at community@lawinsider.com. We hope to see you guys join us then. Rebecca, thank you for joining us this time. You guys have a great day. We will see you next time.
Thank you so much for having me.